What up, everyone? I am Bevin, and welcome to Tales from Tundo, a talkback podcast for Kingdom of Tundo, now available on RogueMatter.com. Here we go in depth behind the scenes with Tundo creator M.A. Del Rosario. Give it up for Rosario!
Yay.
New issues of the comic book and episodes of the podcast are available same day every month. The Kingdom of Tundo is the last bastion of magic in the world of Mayi, but the land is dying and only the last scion of the Dula bloodline can save it. Together with myth folk allies, he tries to unite Tundo and revive it to the glory that it once was. The Kingdom of Tundo is a digital comic, yes, digital comic book, now available at roguematter.com or on the Rogue Matter app because we're cool and we have an app. Rogue Matter is a digital publishing company that shatters boundaries and colors outside the lines, which is one of my favorite things to do. Check out our website or download our mobile app to start consuming all the free content we have, including comics, ebooks, podcasts, videos, and more. Mr. MA, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm great because today we are discussing Kingdom of Tundo number 2, Myth and
Yes.
Magic Part 2, Shadows and
And
Vengeance.
vengeance, yes.
So, if this was a wand, would shadows be the core or would vengeance be the core in Harry Potter lore?
Uh Both I think.
Okay, so what would it be made out of? A bamboo shoot? The wand?
Yes. Yes. It's a bamboo shoot in Harry Potter lore, which is quite unique because you don't have uh I don't know. I don't know. It's gonna be a bamboo thing with probably intricate details in it, not just your ordinary wand.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. And I also love the fact that you could also like decorate the outsides with the reverse centaur creatures. What are they called?
Tikbalang.
Tikbalan. I'm going to learn that one day, guys. I will learn that one day. And then what you could do. And then you could also like maybe if you want to be like a dark side wizard, you could have like the blood force that we're not going to talk about yet, but like that could also
Yeah.
decorate it too. What color would the
Yeah.
wand be?
Um, Black.
Black with
Black.
hints of gray
Probably.
or red.
Grays and reds. Grays and
Grays and
reds.
reds.
Grays and reds.
There you
Yes.
go. Coming soon to a wizarding world near you because we are talking magic. Just to be clear, too, I read also in your bio that you love libraries. Where did that
Yes.
come from?
Uh, when I was a kid, well, no, not a kid. When I was in high school, we I didn't have much to go around with pertaining to books. I used to hang around bookstores just reading whatever was open because they were wrapped in plastic. So whatever was open in the fantasy science fiction section.
Hmm.
So I found out that in our high school library, there were books that you could read for free, and some of them were I was introduced to Tolkien there. They had the Hobbit. They had the Hobbit there, and I began reading it there. And then when I went to college, I frequented the National Library because I was studying in Manila. So the National Library was just a couple of kilometers away. So I'd walk there and just browse through books, history, uh, philosophy, whatever I could get my hands on.
Hmm.
And that's where I was introduced to the myths and the lore of the Philippines. So as time grew on, and then I kind of gotten older and saw that a lot of people were disregarding libraries, and libraries just a great institution for you to go in and get yourself information about almost anything. And I met Ray Bradbury through his books, and I found out that too was a fond person who frequented libraries. So there's something of a kinship there
Uh-huh.
that I found when I was reading Ray Bradbury and then going to libraries. And I love libraries because there's no distraction. You can just sit
Yeah.
in a corner and read. And there was a part of my life when I was in college where I thought the books were talking to me. It was something of a delusion. I don't know if it's a delusion or anything like that, but it felt like the books were talking to me, and that's where figured out it must be magic, you know.
No, I feel that. I feel that. So, one of my favorite movies was the Disney Beauty and the Beast, and one of my favorite scenes is when he's trying to figure out what to do to be nice to Belle after she like rescued him, and it's
Yeah,
this, and then he takes her to this
the lab.
library that I don't know if that exists anywhere, but I need it. But it just looks so magical and beautiful, and I
Yes,
feel like I would get lost in that
yes.
library.
uh, just recently, I think it was yesterday, I was browsing through a couple of images in Facebook where they show this grand libraries of the world, and I said, oh, man, wouldn't that be a great thing just to sit there and have the books all around you? And my background is my small library of things, of certain books, most of them used books that I because I believe that you shouldn't throw away a book. You should love a
No,
book, and a comic book, because in the background, people write these stories with passion and shouldn't be thrown away. That's what I
yeah,
believe in.
no, absolutely. Do you have a favorite library that you've been to?
Well, locally it's the National Library, because I frequent it because you get copyrights there, and I used to go there just to have an excuse of copyrighting my books. But you can always copyright it anytime through the internet. But I that gave me an excuse to go there. Uh, if there was one library that I wanted to go to that doesn't exist now, it's the Library of Alexandria.
Ooh,
um yeah, it's I want, because it's there was so much information that was burned there, and I wanted to, just in my imagination, I wanted to see the scrolls, the
yeah,
old scrolls, the parchments and all of that, and smell the place. There's a certain thing which affects me whenever I smell books, the smell of
yeah.
paper, the smell of parchment, and it rejuvenates me. I don't know about other people, but that's how it affects me.
No, I completely agree. I love the smell of old books, and if I could, I would have a library of my own. Maybe one day I will. But when you're in New York and you're in a 600 square foot apartment, there's only so many books you can buy before you're like, this is a problem, and now I'm a hoarder.
Yeah. 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 I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. If you have nobody's a hoarder when it comes to books.
Ah, a counter argument for another day. But let's
Yes.
jump in to issue 2, Shadows and Vengeance of Kingdom of Tundo. Let's do this. So we
Okay.
actually get to learn some more backstory in this issue about
Yes.
Tala, and she is a god,
God.
correct?
Yes,
And the
goddess.
daughter of goddess, yeah, goddess. And she's the
Hmm.
daughter of Bathala.
Bathala. Yes, Bathala is the
Yes,
main god. You got it right.
I got it. Bathala is a celestial, correct?
Yes. In the world of Mayi, in the world of Kingdom of Tundo,
Okay.
there are the celestial gods and the terrestrial gods. The celestial gods are the gods born out of the universe, born of they were the first. They created when the suns were first birthed in the universe. They were created there. But there's not too many of them actually. So Batal is one of the celestial gods, and actually Tala, the way I made the gods, a certain aspect of them is that when Bathala slept, that's when the terrestrial gods, or the gods, or Mayi, awoken from his dream. So it's not actually like a scientific birthing or anything, but they came into existence because of Bathala's dream. So Tala is the goddess, or the god of the stars, goddess, and she is basically in Philippine folklore a Tagalog god. Bathala. and most of the gods that I used in Kingdom of Tundo are
Hmm.
Tagalog gods. Tagalog meaning the ethno-linguistic group that I belong in, that most of the people here in Luzon, because the Philippines is divided into three regions. The main region, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and most of the Tagalogs live in Luzon as well, where Kingdom of Tondo, the real Kingdom of Tondo, is located.
Wow, that's fascinating. So she's the one, in a sense. She's the daughter. She's the one that kind of saves Bunahu from dying.
Yes, yes, because later on you'll find out that uh, there's a prophecy. Okay, I'll give it that. There's a prophecy, and Bunao is tied to it, and the gods needed to intervene on this particular situation because they cannot let Bunao die.
But in
Otherwise,
general, they're not allowed to intervene.
no, they're not. But
Yeah.
in certain situations, celestials or gods intervene, um, just as some of the story in the stories of other mythologies. Here, Tala intervened because Bunao's death was predicted, so he
Okay.
need
So
and
and
she they need to intervene. Okay.
no, 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 good. I also want to kind of point out some similarities for people that are still new to the Philippine folklore. How similar are
hmm
your celestials to the celestials that we saw in Eternals?
The celestial. If it's they're still gods. If you put it into context, they're probably the same because they create worlds.
Okay.
Uh, but in a way, they're different because there's no scientific context to the gods of Tundo. It's all magic. I'd like to think it that way, but in a certain point of view, they're probably the same.
Are they killing planets when they're birthed?
No, no,
Okay, so that's a big
no.
difference.
The thing is, you see, the thing is with the background of with the background in Tundo, the gods here, the celestials at least,
Mhm.
are benevolent. I would
Mhm.
like to think that there's no there is no god who creates something and and thinks of destroying it that easily, who's not benevolent. There later on you're gonna see the aspect of the antithesis of these gods, but Hala is a benevolent god. He's a creator god. That's how I see some of the gods.
I prefer this version anyway, because when I
Mm.
found that out watching Eternals, I was like, "Oh, this is horrible. I hate this plan."
Yeah.
But no, that's great. So we have benevolent gods, we have benevolent celestials that are not they're wanting to create, not destroy. It's only the
hmm
shadows, which is why we're going to go into shadows that want to destroy and want to feed off
Yes.
anger. They're cool with the dark side. Basically, they want
hmm
fear, anger, hate,
Chaos. Mostly
chaos,
chaos. Yes.
greed, gluttony.
hmm
The seven deadly sins. They want all of it.
Yes. Yeah.
So we get to learn more backstory about Bunahu, and I would love to talk a little bit about story structure because I see you going there and back again, which is
hmm
very interesting in terms of narrative structure. On like this is the present, this is the past, this is the present, this
Yeah.
is the past. What
Yeah.
talk me a little bit about that process of choosing that type of format.
It goes to watching certain movies where you have the flashbacks,
Mm-hmm.
because while I was doing this, I was also envisioning it like it was a movie.
Okay.
You have flashbacks here, and then you have a certain situation here which goes to a flashback here, which makes it more interesting as a narrative
Mm-hmm.
because it's not straight cut, it's not straightforward. It's more it's trying to give the reader a certain piece of information for the story, but not giving it all until you come to the end where it coalesces into that certain narrative that tells the reader that, hey, this is it, this is why it went back there, It's because of his. It's because of a memory. It's because of
Hmm.
a flashback, and then it coalesces into that one narrative that that brings it all together in the end.
Yeah, which brings in it all together is, the shadow encounter where basically Bunahu has to face a dark side version of himself, which
Mm-hmm.
is very interesting. So we kind of go back and forth between his current dilemma, which is he's in a cave. He has to
Mm-hmm.
face his brothers, well, actually just two brothers, correct, that have been turned to
Yes.
monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Um which are I love how you drew them. They were like they're pretty creepy and they're very much like the beast,
Yes.
deformed,
Yeah.
deformed. They must learn to love again, or else they will
Yeah.
remain a beast forever. Nope, sorry, different story. But similar in a sense. While also you're seeing him train and learn from the gods and stuff. And again, they're allowed to get involved because of a prophecy that we're not quite sure of yet. That Bunahu
Yes.
needs to train, needs to get strong, needs to be saved, needs to also
Yes.
have an encounter again. I love too with the folklore, your writing style of this is very once upon a time. Um,
Yes.
very, very, and also kind of like influenced again by like the Tolkien grammar, like narrative format. Do you find it
Yes.
tricky when writing this type of dialogue because the modern audiences are a little different than the classic fairy tales? Do you find it tricky to kind of balance like being true to the type of format you're trying to do versus I've got to bring in modern audiences?
It is actually the first time that, well, I showcased it here in one of the cons. Um, Somebody approached me and he bought it and he read it and he told me that this is purple prosy. This is too much. There's too much purple prose in here. It's not. I told him this is not X-Men. It's not an X-Men comic. It's Kingdom of Tundo. I try to tell a story that is something like a fairy tale,
Mhm.
and this is how fairy tales are told. And you know, it's 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 really hard the first time because you're putting in a fairy tale into a comic book and putting in words that's supposed to sound like a fairy tale,
Mhm.
but at the same time with people looking at it and no, this is a comic book. I want to get out of that. I want to get out of that misnomer, that misconception of what a comic book is supposed to be.
Yeah.
A comic book is a medium to convey a story, and this is the story that I'm telling you, and this is how I wrote it. And you can like it or you cannot like it, but there's no right or wrong with it because it's really putting one and two together, and it's really hard.
No, and I also love too because if you look at like classic older fairy tales and folk tales, they had like a dark element to it and almost a maturity to it that nowadays when writing like for kids, there's like restrictions on, what kind of violence, how much maturity, how much sexuality should be put into something. Did that factor in when you were writing this?
Yes, actually. um I was worried that kids might read this, because, well, it's not really with how the language was delivered. It's how it was structured, because they might not understand because it's fantasy, and it's not kid fantasy, it's not kid comic book. It's more of for a mature audience, but at the same time there's no, like, bad word in there that says that should uh tell a kid not to read it, but they probably wouldn't understand it because it's not your typical comic book.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's more of a literary piece. I would like to there's so much poetry in there that I put in, that some people say here that it's a sin to put in something like that, but which I really don't believe in. But uh, I put in most of my poetry in there with the lyricism, writing the story, writing the narrative in there. That's why it's very wordy. That's
Mhm.
why it's mostly narratives, narrations, and in boxes, because that's how I write a story.
Yeah.
And if you don't like to read it, then don't read it. If you like to read it, then read it. But most of the readers I have here liked it.
Oh,
I
great.
have just a few detractors, but the people who uh read read it here, they actually liked it, and I had good sales before. Well, with the books, with 1 to 4,
Hmm.
because I showcased it in uh conventions here, and I sold it in a bundle, like 1 to 4. When I finished number 4, okay, you can buy 1 to 4, and people liked it.
And the one thing that always people, especially kids, if you really want to draw in kids, that they really like is when you give them like a power sword, which is the I have the power sword. And I don't know what it is about like kids are like, give me a sword. My brother, who's a gamer, like whenever
Yeah.
he plays an RPG, he's always grabbing for like he could be a mage, he could be somebody that like heals, but he's like, nah, give me the dude with the sword. I just want to hack at things. So let's talk about you have a version of a power sword.
Yes.
Uh Dakula? How do you say it?
Dak- Dakila.
Tequila. Oh, it's like tequila.
Yeah,
Da-da-da-da-da.
tequila, but Dakila. Dakila.
Tequila. I
Yeah.
love that you have a power sword that sounds like tequila. There we go. We'll lose the kids there, but we'll keep the adults for that one.
Yeah.
So look, I want to hear about it. So tequila has been bestowed. We get introduced to him, and he is, in a sense, a power sword. Let's hear all
Yes.
about that.
Okay. Apolaki, which in this version of my is the sun god. In Filipino mythology, he's also the sun god, but he's also god of war, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So here in the Kingdom of Tundo, he trains Bunao,
Mm-hmm.
and he gives him his sword, because the sword is an extension of his light, because he is the sun god. It's an extension of his light, and the metaphor there is Bunao brings it back to the world of Mayi, should bring it back to the world of should have bring it back to the world of Mayi, and it becomes the beacon. It becomes the extension of the sun, the light, to the world of Mayi, to the especially the kingdom of Tundo, which is now which is under a blanket of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
That's the metaphor behind it.
It's very Excalibur like too. You know.
Yes, yes. I thought that at first I thought of not giving Bunao a sword, or a weapon that just brute strength.
Mm-hmm.
He uses his wits and he uses his fists. But then that changed later on, because the influence of Lord of the Rings and your sword and Excalibur, and I was reading Once and Future King, and there should be an
Yeah.
Excalibur in there somewhere, a plot device that could be used later on. So I gave him Dakila, which is um which is a kampilan. It's a Mindana. It's a sword. It's a single-edged sword, which is popular with the Muslims here in the Philippines, in Mindanao.
Wow. That's really cool. And it's what's sad is that we get used to we get introduced to Tequila and then he loses it and then we get to find out here what happened and why he lost his memory. And let's talk a little bit about that plot point where he kind of fails his first test, which is again very Star Wars of you to kind of also kind of like Luke has been training and now he's got to go into I forget what the cave is called and
Yeah.
face like Darth Vader
Mm-hmm.
and all that. I don't know how well you know Star Wars, but big Star Wars
Very
fan over
well.
here. Yeah,
Very well.
so you have a very similar encounter like in Empire Strikes Back where he's been sent to a Stephen King like tower to kind of face his inner
Yes.
self. Um,
Yes.
and then we lose
It.
Tequila.
Yes. Yes. Actually, yeah. There's that mirroring of that certain plot point with Empire Strikes Back. But there's also, I was reading a couple of philosophy books, and figuring out, I came into encounter with the id and the ego,
Hmm.
the ego and the super ego,
Yeah.
where, yeah, where you fight yourself, because your past self fights with your future self. No, not your
Mhm.
future self, but your present self, because this is who you're supposed to be. This is the past self who wants to be this and that, back and forth. So I thought of putting that philosophy in there. Now, um, who could Bunao have uh, have someone to fight with that is as strong as him, that is as righteous, supposedly righteous as him. And then it dawned on me that maybe it's himself. Maybe
Yeah.
he should fight himself in that certain aspect. Now, while he was falling when he was a kid, when you're a kid, you say a lot of things that you don't really mean. You know certain things that you really don't understand. So he's like that. He was thrown off the cliff, and I'm angry at you, my brothers. I'm gonna get back at you if I fall and I survive this. I'm gonna get back at you. And then he was offered by the shadows, which is really the real antagonist of
Yeah.
the whole of everything. So he was given that choice, and that choice became his vengeance, and his vengeance became flesh. And somewhere in there, he fought it. He fought himself. That's the metaphor behind it.
And that's so interesting too, because I couldn't wait to talk to you about the term vengeance. Because as a fellow back geek, I I always thought that vengeance once wasn't necessarily negative. I thought revenge was negative. I thought hate and anger is negative. But I would
Hmm.
love to kind of do a deep dive in why is vengeance a problem in this world? Why is that in a negative light in this world? That term.
Well, there's the good and the bad of vengeance, like it's a two-edged sword.
Like this.
Yeah, yeah. If vengeance is used to conquer the wrongs that have been done to you, then vengeance is probably a good sword. If vengeance is used to wrong to extend that righteousness and become a self-righteous thing, and you don't just overthrow the bad guy, but you become the bad guy, then that vengeance is a bad sword. There has to be a limit with what vengeance is. And I think in this world, you know it's really the greed behind doing the vengeance. I want more. I have tasted vengeance. I have become righteous. So now I want to extend that righteousness without even thinking that, oh, maybe it's wrong.
Yeah, no, it's a solid argument. I think you could almost argue two sides to every single term out there, like righting the
Yeah,
wrongs, vengeance, conquering in order to free, you know, going what do we do in the United States? We went west as a way to liberate, but we also enslaved at the same time. So it's a
yeah,
fascinating argument to have. It just
yeah,
depends on how you use it. Is basically what you're saying.
yeah. It's how you use it. uh in this in issue 2, it's used as it becomes a bad thing, because too much of anything is bad. You can only do vengeance as much as, actually, for me, vengeance is kind of the last resort for anything.
And we're
um
gonna and we're gonna find out how that plays out. But we do find out that because he used vengeance for the wrong reason, he therefore was stripped of his memories. Correct?
Correct. Later on, you're going to find out how he loses his memories. uh but here he is introduced to his nemesis. I always think that our own worst enemy is ourselves, because it's like golf. You're not playing against anyone, you're playing against yourself. you know and in life, I always think that before you get into something, you should consult yourself, because sometimes you can contradict yourself, and sometimes that contradiction can be your downfall.
Mm,
Sometimes it gets the better of you, because we're only human. We're
we're
only
only
human. And
human.
yeah, and Bunau is like that. He's only human.
He's
I
only a
mean,
demigod.
he's only a demigod, but he still, has his flaws. It's not
Yes.
perfect like the gods.
Well, much to learn he still has, but We have to say that for another issue and another
Yes,
time and another place. But
yes.
before we go, MA, where can the people on the interwebs find you?
Okay, Facebook and Instagram, it's paper drawing studio. That's one word. And at Twitter, you can find me at paper_drawing.
Excellent. And I am Bevin. You can find me at Bevin Bat Spice because I'm a Spice Girl and I'm a Bat Spice because I like Batman. That's the whole story behind it. And until next time, this has been Tales from Tundo, Episode 2, a talkback podcast for Kingdom of Tundo. New issues of the comic book and episodes of the podcast are available monthly. Check out roguematter.com or download the Rogue Matter app because we're cool and we have an app available on iOS and Android to read The Kingdom of Tundo number 2. Issue 3 will be available on roguematter.com June 29th. Tales from Tundo episode 3 will be available the same day. And we out.